as I think about things today, I wanted to talk about a word that is bandied about in our culture constantly, politically, religiously, socially. It seems as if we love to call each other hypocrites, that we love to attack the other side of an argument. I don't care where it stands, as somebody who pretends to believe one thing but really acts in another way. And to be honest, if it's really happening, if there's somebody who sets up a standard, right, who says, for example, well, we should protect the environment, and in their daily lives they flagrantly really ignore that. They make money off of the topic. They live as if there is no pollution, and yet they're constantly talking about how others should protect the earth, right? In other words, if there's a blatant, obvious hypocrisy where the person is really just saying something for the sake of getting popular opinion or getting influence or making money, but they don't really believe it, that's a legitimate form of hypocrisy. That's something that should be labeled and should be called out, because it's a hypocrisy that comes right from the core. From, I never meant what I said ever. I just said it to get gain. I said it to manipulate. I said it to take advantage. In essence, it's a destructive way of living, and there are people who live that way. And I used environmental issues, but I could say religion as well. There are people, and I'm a religious person, who stand up and say, well, you should love your neighbor, and you should forgive, and you should be faithful to your spouse. And they say these things all the while they knowingly fester grudges, and they intentionally and consistently cheat on their spouse. And all they do is espouse the virtues so that they can get maybe some trust that isn't deserved, or they can fit into a society where maybe there's some advantage to pretending that they have those values. So again, that's an open and intentional and real hypocrisy. Somebody who is manipulating and intentionally lying. Well, I'd like to just ask a question, and it's a sincere question, a real question. How many people do you know are truly so evil and so conniving and so horrific that they wake up in the morning and they talk about their values, and in their heart and in their mind they know they are just manipulating others, that they really have no intention of living up to those standards? I mean, really, we're talking about a deep intent, a knowing hypocrisy. How many people are that bad? Now, if you're saying that, well, most people, I would kindly like to suggest that maybe you're just being harsh on people and you're not understanding the nature of being human. Because I really think that 95% of us in this country and in this world, we are not intentionally being hypocrites. Now, we might not be living up to the standards we've set, that's true. But that's different. That's different than somebody who isn't intentionally telling a lie, who never, ever, ever woke up with the intent to follow through on the standards. It's different. Because really, in our world today, in the world we live in, the only way to not be a hypocrite, right, is to set low standards. Let's see if I can tease this out. Let's say, for example, I'm a man who believes in being faithful to a spouse, right? And I'm a man who says that, well, being faithful really means that I shouldn't look at pornography ever. Well, it's a great example, because in our world today, there are two things that are true. Number one, pornography is absolutely everywhere. In essence, it's become pretty much accepted as just a pastime or something you do, or it's kind of like drinking water, eating a meal. It's considered extremely normal in many areas. And maybe some of you listening think it's normal. Well, there are religious people, whether you agree or disagree, who feel that pornography is something that isn't really meant to be within a marital relationship or within somebody's life. It's not pure. Again, whether that annoys you or not is irrelevant. There are people who have that standard. Well, let's be honest. Somebody who has that standard also has the genetics and the impulses to look at pornography. has the impulses to follow up on that because it's a part of our nature. It really is. It's a part of the physical reality of our genetics and our hormones and things like that. And so when somebody sets a standard and says, well, I don't believe pornography is healthy or good and I think it should be avoided. Well, they've set a standard now. Well, let's say they had every intention to follow that standard. They had every belief and they worked very, very hard, and for the most part, they've been able to avoid it. And then one night at a hotel, at work, by themselves, they just give in and they binge watch it, right? Well, look, in that scenario, the person has now become a hypocrite. They set a standard that they did not keep. But I hope that in all of your minds, you're already seeing that there's a difference between my opening discussion of hypocrisy and this second example. They aren't the same. In the first example, the person would have said, well, you shouldn't look at pornography, but maybe they lived in the deep south or they lived in a religious Mormon community, and they said that just so that they would get social favor in kind of the social standards of the area. But they always believed in fact, they invested in and produced pornography regularly. Well, that's an intentional hypocrite, somebody who really never intended to live it. The second person is technically a hypocrite as well, because we could talk about the fact that they didn't live up to the standard that they set. But it's not that they intended to fall from their standard. It's just that they set a standard to challenge themselves to rise up above a weakness that they currently have, and in a moment of weakness, they fell below that standard. Well, it's my honest opinion that most of us, 80 to 95% of us in this world, experience hypocrisy in the second form. We set standards we truly believe in. We set standards that we think are right and accurate and strong, and we believe them, and we work very hard to stand up to them, to accomplish them, to live by them. And then in our humanity, right, the elusive, in our striving to become that ideal, elusively trying to find out how we control our impulses, we fall from our standard. Well, the only way to not do that, in my opinion, is to never set a high standard in the first place, right? If we all just said, oh, forget it, I'm never going to be faithful to my spouse, I'm never going to be honest, and forget it, I'm never going to love my neighbor, and forget it, I'm never gonna avoid being hateful. No, I'm just forget it. That is the only way, honestly, to not be a hypocrite. It's not possible to live at the highest standard at all times. Now, in some areas of our lives, maybe we'll be perfect all the way through our lives, right? Maybe in some areas, maybe those who believe in not polluting the earth, they'll always use organic, they'll always use recyclables, they'll never use electricity, they'll really honestly stay true to the standard of not polluting the earth all the way till they die. But in some part in their life, if they set a standard, they will fall short. They will not make it. Well, why would we, as other human beings, why would we ever decide to put somebody down for falling short of a standard they're trying to reach? What is the point of that? Why would we do that? They're reaching for that standard. They're trying to get there, and boom, in a moment of weakness, they fall short. Why would we come back in, support them, strengthen them, and say, hey, thank you so much for setting a high standard. It inspires me to live better, and give them encouragement to go back out and try again? Is it that we're so glad to see them fail because that means that we don't have to live up to that standard? Is that what that's about? Is that why when we watch TV and politicians and things, and one of them truly falls from their standard, whether it's Republican or Democrat, that we're saying like, oh, see, that's dumb, that's not really true, and that's stupid, and I mean, you hear in so many different ways, right? There was a Democratic senator who was against gun control, who was caught having helped sell guns into gangs. Literally, he was making money helping sell guns into gangs, but he publicly, favored gun control. Well, of course, everybody says, well, that's horrible, and so you never believed in gun control, and they attacked everything about the man's principles. Well, I don't believe in gun control. I'm a conservative. That's definitely a truth. But in the same sense, just because this man was a hypocrite, does that mean that in his heart he didn't really believe that there might be some good to humanity through gun control? Now, I don't believe that it's more helpful, but What I'm saying is this man's intentions. Of course, he got caught up in greed, he got caught up in power, and thus he was acting very much as a hypocrite. But does that necessarily mean that what he's representing doesn't have followers who truly believe it, who see that as a positive standard? And does it do us any good to then demonize all people who believe in control as hateful constitution destroyers who do nothing but love gangs? Of course not. It doesn't make any sense. And so, it's important to recognize that when we see hypocrisy, it doesn't necessarily destroy the standard or the ideal or the genuineness of the feeling behind the standard or even others that may believe it. How about in the Republican side, right? Whenever you see a Republican senator who's caught in an affair, right? How many people come out and say, oh, see, you guys, you conservatives, you don't really believe in fidelity. You don't really believe in families. It's all a bunch of hogwash just to control everybody else, and it's all about power and money. Well, really? Really? Did that senator who fell did he really intentionally want to hurt his wife and hurt his children and create an environment where everybody in the world could say, see, being faithful to your spouse has no value? Or did he get caught up in lust or maybe in stress and loneliness or whatever it is? Or did somebody intentionally politically try to destroy his career and seduce him, whatever the case is? Is it really a case of the Democratic senators and the Republican senators? Is it really a case of them being truly evil and manipulating? Well, if it is, they should be held accountable. But if it isn't, shouldn't we as human beings recognize that these people need additional help and strength and encouragement to get back up to the standard that they originally set? That they need to be reinvigorated with a sense of responsibility so they can get back to living the standard? So I say again, look at your own lives in terms of hypocrisy. Aren't there a million ways in which you set a standard that you haven't yet hit it? Haven't you said, well, I'm going to be kind and loving to my children, and yet found yourself one day being completely selfish and unloving? Has that never happened? Or maybe losing your temper so much that you know that instead of disciplining, you cause sincere damage or hurt to your child? Has that never happened? Have you never talked about loving your neighbor and then found yourself hatefully trolling on the internet? Or talked about loving your neighbor, but immediately when they disagree with you, throwing out some label like, like hedonist or racist or bigot, right? Is there nothing in your own life where you've fallen short of a standard? Well, there is no way to not be a hypocrite except for setting low standards. You set standards that you can always meet. You set standards that are easy to follow. You set standards where you could never not meet them. If you don't do that at some point in your life, you will be a hypocrite. And so I say again, in our public dialogue, in our own lives, are we really benefited by running around calling each other a hypocrite? Or would we be better off served going around and finding the true ideals of the persons and people we're dealing with, supporting them, and then if we disagree, finding some way to have some intelligent conversation so we can boil it down to why there's a disagreement and how we can work together to overcome that disagreement. But to throw the word hypocrite out there, I'm sorry. I think every single one of us should set high enough standards that we're constantly striving for, that we find ourselves in the hypocrite's chair fairly regularly. And of course, as we grow as people, then we set higher standards. And as we grow again, we set even higher standards. So that we almost always find ourselves falling short of our ideals. I think that's what makes for a great society. And I think by giving everybody the grace to set high ideals that even fail, and then encouraging them to get back up and try again, that we'll be far better off than the silly idea of constantly tearing each other down by pointing out the fact that we're weak, we have challenges, and we often fall short. Have a great day.